Well, I think that's a bit rich of Bodger saying that the reason for political inaction on climate is apathy, political indifference and a lack of will. Well, I believe that he is guilty, guilty and guilty in that order. You know, I don't think there's another country on earth that that funds the oil companies as much as we do. I'll get to that in a minute. Should I start with the Conservative Party's promises and their failure to deliver on them? I mean, there's just so many. I mean, which promise have they made since Bodger came to power that they have actually delivered on? £350 million a week extra for the NHS? Not really. £800 million a week less after leaving. Not £350 million a week more. So that's not true.
Liar!
And it just goes on and on and on. Friends of the Earth say, as hosts of the UN climate talks in Glasgow, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the UK government will be asking world leaders to address climate crisis by transitioning away from climate-wrecking fossil fuels, committing to strong net zero emissions targets, and providing funding for transition to renewables, especially for poorer countries. But how can we expect other nations to listen to our government when it's not taking climate action itself? They say instead of ending the funding and extraction of fossil fuels, the UK government is allowing the development of a new coal mine in Cumbria, an oil extraction in Surrey and the North Sea. What's more, it is funding fossil fuel projects abroad, providing $1 billion worth for a gas mega project in Mozambique. Don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Sky News reports Boris Johnson's government has reneged on key promises it made in the efforts to combat climate change, according to one of the most senior Conservative environmentalists. The Tory chair of the Climate Change Committee, which advises the government on tackling global warming, has condemned the decision by ministers to give in to Australian demands to water down environmental protections in the UK-Australia trade deal. Just the very idea that we're skipping trading with Europe, you could spit that far. You can actually see them from here. To concentrating on negotiating trade deals with countries that are the furthest away that you could possibly get on this planet. It's insane. Liz Truss, the International Trade Secretary, and Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng decided that the government could drop both of the climate asks from the text of the trade deal with Australia. Among areas to be removed was a reference to the Paris Agreement temperature goals. Government sources confirmed that the references to temperature are now implicit rather than spelt out in the text. In other words, they've ignored them. It's different from the UK-EU trade deal, where temperature commitments are explicitly in the deal. But when we did a deal with Australia, one of the worst polluters on Earth, I think they've got the biggest coal reserves in the world, then their insistence was that we drop our insistence on any sort of green part of that deal. And as we hold none of the cards, we can't even bully Australia into doing what we want, never mind about the European Union. The Independent reports that Boris Johnson's promise of more than $11 billion to help poorer countries adapt to the climate emergency will be paid for by even deeper cuts to the UK's other overseas aid projects. Failure to provide fresh funding leaves the Prime Minister's claim to be leading the world on the environment in tatters. The World Health Organization has already warned that hundreds of thousands of people will die of tropical diseases because of these cuts. But, never mind. We can't see them, so who cares, right? The Telegraph reports Greta Thunberg has accused Britain of lying about its climate credentials in a series of scathing comments. She said, "Liar!" At a UNICEF press briefing, she said this country is guilty of creative carbon accounting and suggested it's a lie that the UK is a climate leader. It's only 3 years since she launched that Fridays for Future campaign, which she was striking at school. It seems much, much longer than that, doesn't it? The effect that she has had. This tiny schoolgirl. 3 years, that's all. Amazing. In that intervening period, millions of young people have protested against the lack of action to protect the environment. And she said that global leaders still treat the climate crisis as a faraway, distant problem. She said, it feels like that in this country we're trying to create loopholes instead of actually trying to find solutions that would actually turn things around. There's a lie that the UK is a climate leader and that they have reduced their CO2 emissions by 44% since 1990, she said. If you include things like aviation, shipping, outsourcing and consumption, for instance, and the burning of biomass, it doesn't really look that good. In other words, we're lying about it. Loopholes, always looking for loopholes. We've outsourced our pollution to China and other countries that will take it on. The World Wildlife Fund says the cost of renewables has fallen faster than anyone could have predicted, and yet the government are still backing dirty fossil fuels. Did you know that the UK has the biggest fossil fuel subsidies in the EU? We spend 12 billion euros a year supporting dirty fossil fuels. We do. 12 billion a year. Global warming is causing the Earth's average surface temperature to increase. This is not only making heat waves and droughts more likely, but is also causing changes to our natural climate systems. These changes are making extreme weather events more likely. Well, just look out the window. Does it look like an extreme weather event?
Yes.
Always. It doesn't rain anymore. It's a deluge. They said, for example, hurricanes and storms are becoming more intense, moving slower and taking longer to die down. And because of where we are, you want the bad news? Because of where we are, the UK and Ireland are more likely to get more rain and wind as a result of climate change. Ain't going to get warmer, it's going to get worse. In fact, if that gyre, that meridional thing, whatever you call it, that current that brings up warm water from the south and keeps our climate relatively pleasant, if that stops, which it could do at any time, it could just stop. It has stopped in the past for something like 12,000 years it stopped. If it stops, then we could be as cold as Siberia, because that's where we are. I mean, if you look at the latitude, other places on the map that are as high up as we are, we don't really have any business being as clement and pleasant as we are currently enjoying it. We could be up to our eyeballs in snow. Then we'll be disappointed. The Guardian reports Shell and BP, which together produce more than 1.7 billion tonnes of greenhouse gases a year, have not paid any corporation tax on oil and gas production in the North Sea for the last 3 years. The oil giants, which have an annual global footprint of greenhouse gases more than 5 times bigger than Britain's, are benefiting from billions of pounds of tax breaks and relief for oil and gas production. Shell and BP paid no corporation tax or production levies on North Sea oil operations between 2018 and 2020, and claimed tax reliefs of nearly £400 million, according to annual payments to governments reports analysed by The Observer. Over the same 3-year period, they paid shareholders more than £44 billion in dividends. Wow. Huh. A petroleum revenue tax of 35% was effectively scrapped by George Osborne.
No!
That's him. That was in 2016, and oil giants can claim billions of pounds in taxpayer handouts for decommissioning rigs. They make the profits, we clean up after them. The North Sea is now one of the most profitable areas in the world for oil and gas production because of tax cuts by the government to encourage production. Philip Evans, oil and gas campaigner for Greenpeace UK, says it's outrageous that as the UK prepares to host the global climate talks in Glasgow, we still have one of the lowest effective tax rates in the world for oil extraction. We're giving tax breaks worth billions of pounds to companies that have been fueling the climate emergency for decades. The UK has some of the lowest oil tax rates in the world. And an analysis by research company Rystad Energy in January found the UK is now the most profitable country on earth for the development of oil and gas mega projects. Well, ain't that great? So just keep that in mind when Boris Johnson tells you how green his government is.